The silence in the conference room at Morrison & Associates was a physical entity, a thick, suffocating blanket woven from tension and unspoken judgment. It was the kind of silence that amplifies every rustle of paper, every nervous cough, every click of a pen. For Kesha Rodriguez, the silence was a roaring in her ears, a prelude to a storm she had seen brewing on the horizon but had desperately hoped to outrun. Against her chest, her 6-year-old son Jordan was a fragile weight. His small body, usually a whirlwind of inexhaustible energy, was unnervingly still. His breathing was a shallow, raspy whisper, a stark counterpoint to the oppressive quiet of the room. The asthma attack had struck in the blackest hours of the morning, a terrifying ordeal that had sent them rushing to the emergency room for the second time in a month. The lingering pallor on his face and the faint bluish tint to his lips were terrifying reminders of how quickly his world could narrow to a desperate fight for air. "What the hell is that kid doing here, Kesha? This is an office, not a daycare." The voice belonged to Victoria Crawford, and it cut through the silence like a shard of glass. It wasn't just loud, it was weaponized. Each word was carefully chosen to inflict maximum humiliation, to assert dominance. The 20 employees seated around the polished mahogany table, once focused on the quarterly projections displayed on the screen, now swiveled their heads in unison, their gazes a mixture of pity, morbid curiosity, and thinly veiled relief. That they weren't the target landed squarely on Kesha. Kesha hugged Jordan tighter, a primal, protective gesture. She could feel his small heart thumping a frantic rhythm against her own. She met Victoria's glacial blue eyes, trying to project a calm she was far from feeling. "I'm so sorry, Miss Crawford," she began, her voice miraculously steady. "The babysitter cancelled at the last minute. It was an emergency on her end. I couldn't miss today. It's the Miller Project presentation. I've been coordinating it for the last 3 months." Every word was true, but she knew the truth was irrelevant. In Victoria Crawford's world, excuses were synonymous with weakness. Victoria's heels clicked an aggressive staccato on the gleaming hardwood floor as she advanced toward them. At 42, she was the executive director of Morrison & Associates, a position she wore like a suit of bespoke armor. Her silver blonde hair was pulled back in a severe chignon, not a single strand out of place. Her tailored pantsuit was the color of blood. She was a monument to corporate ruthlessness, a woman who had built her career not on innovation or mentorship, but on the strategic elimination of those she deemed inferior. Her privileged upbringing had been a gilded path, free of the systemic barriers and unseen hurdles that Kesha had spent her entire life learning to navigate. For Victoria, the world was a simple meritocracy where she had, by virtue of her existence, already won. "Company policy is clear, Kesha. No exceptions." Victoria's lips curled into a semblance of a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. Those remained chips of ice. "You're fired. Effective immediately." The words hung in the air, monstrous and absolute. Fired. The single syllable was a wrecking ball, demolishing the foundation of the life Kesha had so painstakingly built. 6 years of dedication, 6 years of late nights, working weekends, and missed holidays. 6 years of swallowing casual slights and microaggressions, of working twice as hard to get half the recognition, or to prove she belonged. She had missed Jordan's 4th and 5th birthday parties because of urgent deadlines set by the very woman who now stood before her, dismantling her career with casual cruelty. All of it, erased in less than 30 seconds of public degradation. Victoria turned her attention to the silent audience. "Let this be an example to you all," she announced, her voice ringing with self-satisfaction, professionalism. Above all else, a dry, hacking cough escaped Jordan's lips. The sound was raw and painful, and it spurred Kesha into action. Her own shock and humiliation were secondary to the immediate, pressing need of her child. Her hands, trembling not from fear but from a surge of white-hot, contained fury, fumbled in her oversized bag for the inhaler. She found the cool plastic and brought it to Jordan's mouth. "Breathe with me, sweetheart. Slowly now, in and out," she whispered, her voice a soft anchor in the turbulent room. She ignored the impatient sighs and the shuffling of feet around her. In that moment, the 20 employees, the multi-million-dollar Miller Project, the entire corporate structure of Morrison & Associates ceased to exist. There was only her son's labored breathing and the desperate need to ease it. "See," Victoria gestured dramatically, as if Kesha's maternal care was Exhibit A in a trial against her character. "This is exactly why single mothers don't work in high-powered corporate environments. They always have divided priorities." The comment was a poisoned dart, aimed not just at Kesha, but at a stereotype she had fought her entire career to defy. Kesha's eyes scanned the faces of her colleagues, searching for a single flicker of support, a dissenting glance. She found none. Robert, a senior analyst whose career she had personally saved 3 months prior, was staring intently at his own shoes. He had made a catastrophic error in a financial model, a mistake that would have cost the company $250,000. Kesha had discovered it at 8 p.m. on a Friday and had worked through the entire night, meticulously untangling the mess and rebuilding the model from scratch. She never asked for credit, content to have averted the disaster and saved her team member's job. Now, as her own career was being executed, Robert found the craftsmanship of his loafers utterly fascinating. Jennifer from accounting, a kind woman with whom Kesha often shared lunch, coughed nervously into her hand. Marcus from marketing, who had praised her strategic insights just yesterday, was now engrossed in fiddling with his phone, his thumb swiping aimlessly across a black screen. They were all complicit in their silence, trapped in a web of fear spun by Victoria. To stand up for Kesha would be to paint a target on their own backs, and survival, she knew, was a powerful anesthetic for conscience. Security is on their way to escort you out, Victoria announced, the cruel satisfaction in her smile now undisguised. And make sure you return your badge and the keys to the company car. The company car, a 2018 sedan that had been a major selling point when she accepted the promotion last year. The badge that had been a symbol of her hard-won success. Now, they were just instruments of her shame. As Kesha slowly began to gather her things, a small insulated lunch bag and her worn leather portfolio, she noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. A detail that cut through the fog of her anger. Victoria, standing near the head of the table, was holding her phone, angled discreetly downwards. The small red light of the recording function was blinking. She was filming this. The realization was a jolt of ice water. Victoria wasn't just firing her, she was creating content. This humiliation was a performance, a carefully staged drama for an unseen audience. She would likely post it on her LinkedIn or some other platform, framed as a masterclass in effective leadership and maintaining professional standards. The thought was so vile, so cynically manipulative, that it extinguished the last embers of Kesha's shock and ignited something else entirely. It planted a seed, a cold, hard, calculating seed in the scorched earth of her mind. "Mommy, why is that lady being mean to us?" Jordan's voice was weak, but it carried in the silent room. A few of her colleagues, the ones who had children of their own, finally had the decency to look away, their gazes dropping to the table in shame. Kesha looked down at her son, her expression softening. She smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "Because some people confuse cruelty with power, sweetheart," she said, her voice clear and loud enough for everyone to hear. "But that doesn't mean they're always right. Come on, Jordan, let's go home." With her head held high, she walked toward the door, her son, a precious burden, in her arms. She could feel the weight of every eye on her back. It was a walk of shame, but she refused to let her shoulders slump. She refused to let them see her break. Anyone watching closely, however, would have noticed a subtle shift in her eyes. The initial shock and hurt had been replaced by something else. It was not the look of defeat. It was the sharp, focused glint of a predator that has just identified its prey's fatal weakness. It was the look of someone who had just been handed the key to a locked door. As she stood waiting for the elevator in the hushed, marble-floored lobby, the two security guards hovering awkwardly a few feet away, she leaned down and whispered into Jordan's ear. "Mummy is going to show these people what happens when they underestimate an intelligent, determined woman." She felt a smile touch her lips for the first time that day. It was not a smile of happiness or warmth. It was a smile of cold, razor-sharp determination. A promise. Victoria Crawford, in her blind arrogance, believed she had one. She had purged her pristine office of an inconvenience and made a powerful example of an employee she disdained. She had no idea that in her quest to humiliate a single mother, she had not extinguished a flame, she had ignited a wildfire. She had awakened something far more dangerous than a woman's anger. She had awakened the calculated, strategic mind of someone who had just been given all the information she needed for a spectacular comeback. The game wasn't over. 2 hours later, Kesha sat on her worn, second-hand couch, the springs groaning in protest. Jordan was asleep in his room, his breathing finally even and deep, a sound more precious to her than any stock portfolio. The humiliating video was already on Victoria's LinkedIn page. The caption was a masterpiece of corporate psychopathy. "Effective leadership means making the tough decisions. We cannot allow emotions and personal situations to compromise professional excellence." Hashtag responsible leadership, hashtag professional standards, hashtag corporate integrity. It had 423 likes. Kesha scrolled through the comments, her stomach churning. Inspirational. Victoria, a true leader. Mark Jennings, CEO, FinCorp, exactly the kind of firm I want to do business with. No nonsense. Philip Chen, managing partner, Crestview Capital. Wish my boss had this kind of courage. We have too many slackers using their kids as an excuse. A mid-level manager from a rival firm. She read every single comment. She memorized the names, the job titles, the companies. Her mind, sharp and analytical from years of managing complex projects, began to work like a high-speed computer, cross-referencing, filing, building a network map of Victoria's Secret. These people weren't just cheering on a bully, they were endorsing a philosophy, and they would all be held accountable. "Mummy, why are you crying?" Jordan's small voice startled her. He was standing in the doorway of the living room, rubbing his eyes, clutching the little toy car she had found in a donation bin and fixed for him. It was missing a wheel, but he loved it fiercely. Kesha quickly wiped a tear from her cheek, a tear not of sadness, but of pure, unadulterated rage. "I'm not crying, sweetheart," she said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm planning." She moved to the small desk crammed into a corner of the living room and opened her laptop, a refurbished model she'd bought 3 years ago. The first thing she did was create a new, password-protected folder on her desktop. She named it project_Victoria. The first file she saved was a screen recording of the LinkedIn post and all its comments. Then, she began to dig. She spent hours meticulously researching Victoria Crawford, moving with a forensic focus through social media profiles, professional histories, news articles, and even public property records. What she found painted a picture not of a self-made corporate titan, but of a woman born on third base who believed she'd hit a triple. Victoria had inherited her position. Her father, a silent partner in Morrison and Associates, had secured her the entry-level job right out of college. She had never worked anywhere else. She had never faced a real job interview, never experienced the gut-wrenching fear of a layoff, never had to justify her existence in a competitive market. Her Instagram account was a shrine to unearned opulence. Photos from yacht parties in Monaco, ski trips in Aspen, designer bags that cost more than Kesha's annual salary. The captions were peppered with smug, condescending remarks about people who don't try hard enough and the importance of hustle. A concept she clearly understood only in the abstract. The next morning, the second blow landed. An email from Morrison and Associates' HR department arrived. It was curt and clinical. It informed her that, as she had been terminated for cause, all her company benefits, including her health insurance, were cancelled retroactively to the day of her dismissal. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. Jordan's prescription for his maintenance inhaler needed a refill without insurance. The cost was $230. She immediately checked her bank account. The balance read $340.17. Her rent, a staggering $800 for their small, 2-bedroom apartment, was due in 1 week. The math was brutal and unforgiving. Even if she bought Jordan's medicine, she wouldn't have enough money for groceries for the week, let alone the rent. For a moment, the weight of it all pressed down on her, the sheer, crushing injustice. It was in that moment of near despair that a memory surfaced, a voice from the past, her mother's voice. She was 16, and her mother, a fiercely proud woman who worked as a seamstress, had just lost her job at the factory. They were weeks away from being evicted. Kesha remembered sitting at their small kitchen table, surrounded by overdue bills and the smell of stale coffee, watching her mother pore over legal documents with a magnifying glass. Rich people, powerful people, they always leave clues, Mia, her mother had said, her finger tracing a line of fine print on the lease agreement. They get arrogant. They think the rules don't apply to them, and that's where you find your leverage. Her mother had discovered their landlord was systematically overcharging rent to a dozen tenants in the building, a clear violation of city housing regulations. An anonymous tip to the housing authority not only saved them from eviction but triggered a class action lawsuit that benefited the entire building. Intelligence. Kesha, her mother had whispered to her during one of those difficult nights, always beats brute force. Remember that. Now, at 29, in the dim light of her own living room, surrounded by her own pile of looming bills, Kesha finally, truly understood. Victoria's arrogance was not just a character flaw, it was a strategic vulnerability. It was the clue. She went back to her laptop, her purpose renewed. Inside project_Victoria, she created subfolders. She saved screenshots of Victoria's Instagram, Posts from the past 2 years, especially the ones with questionable captions. She found a tweet from 2021 where Victoria had complained about the burden of maternity leave policies. She found a Facebook post mocking a former employee for requesting time off for a family emergency. Each comment was subtle enough to maintain plausible deniability, to avoid legal trouble, but when viewed together, they formed an undeniable mosaic of prejudice. Her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Kesha, it's Jennifer, from accounting. Her voice was a nervous whisper. I am so sorry about what happened yesterday. That was just awful. It was wrong. Thanks, Jen, Kesha said, her voice neutral, calculating. Listen, some of us, we're thinking about filing a formal complaint with HR. What she did, in front of everyone. Don't, Kesha interrupted, her mind racing ahead. An internal HR complaint would be buried. Victoria and her father would ensure it. Don't risk your job for me. It's not worth it. There was a pause. Okay, Jennifer said, sounding relieved and slightly guilty. By the way, Kesha added, her tone casual, I was just curious about something. Do you still have access to the company's shared drive? The one with the old HR policy archives? Yeah, I think so. Why? Just trying to remember a detail from the old employee handbook for my own records. Nothing big. Okay, yeah, I can access that. Thanks, Jen. I appreciate the call. After she hung up, a small, cold smile touched Kesha's lips. Jennifer didn't know it, but she had just become an unwitting key, a source of invaluable institutional knowledge. That night, long after Jordan was asleep, Kesha worked with a relentless, feverish intensity, fueled by black coffee and a burning sense of purpose. She dove into the digital archives Jennifer had given her a backdoor to. What she found was staggering. Victoria had personally terminated 17 employees in the last 2 years. 15 of them were women. 12 of them were minorities. She cross-referenced the termination dates with company email records and calendar invites. A chilling pattern emerged. Almost every dismissal was preceded by the employee having a personal or family emergency, a sick child, an ailing parent, a medical issue. Victoria had weaponized their vulnerability, using their moments of personal crisis as a pretext to fire them for vague reasons like cultural incompatibility or not being a team player. Deeper in the archives, she found a digital footprint of a labor lawsuit filed against Victoria 3 years ago. The plaintiff was a woman named Maria Sanchez. The complaint alleged wrongful termination and discrimination based on national origin, but the case had vanished. It had been dropped abruptly. Kesha dug further, using public court records. The case was listed as settled out of court. That meant a payout, and a confidentiality clause. An NDA. Victoria had a history, and the company had paid to bury it. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. She found Maria Sanchez on Facebook. Her profile was private, but her profile picture showed her standing proudly with 2 young children. Another mother. At 3 a.m., her eyes gritty with exhaustion, Kesha picked up her phone and dialed a number she hadn't used in 2 years. It rang 4 times before a sleepy, gravelly voice answered. Yeah, Marcus. It's Kesha Rodriguez. There was a pause, then a slow dawning of recognition. Kesha, girl, it's 3 o'clock in the morning. Is everything okay? Not exactly, she said. But it's going to be. I need a favor. Marcus Williams had been her classmate in business school. A sharp, cynical man who had left the corporate world to become a private investigator, specializing in corporate malfeasance. More importantly, he owed her. 2 years ago, his wife had been accused of embezzling from the non-profit she worked for. The evidence seemed airtight. Marcus was distraught, their marriage on the rocks. Kesha, with her knack for seeing patterns in data, had spent a weekend analyzing the non-profit's financial records and discovered the real culprit was the CFO who had framed Marcus's wife to cover his own tracks. She had saved his marriage, and his wife's reputation. Anything for you, you know that, Marcus said, his voice now fully awake and alert. She told him everything. The Miller Project, Jordan's asthma attack, the public firing, the video, the insurance, the folder named Project_Victoria. She laid it all out, every humiliating detail, every piece of evidence she had gathered. Was silent for a long time after she finished. When he finally spoke, his voice was laced with cold fury. This Victoria, she sounds like a real piece of work. She is, Kesha confirmed. Send me everything you have, the LinkedIn post, the screenshots, the names from the comments, the employee records you found, everything, he commanded. And Kesha, When I'm done with this woman, she's going to wish she'd never even learned how to spell your name. As she attached the files to a secure, encrypted email and hit send, Kesha felt a profound shift inside her. The fear and panic that had threatened to drown her were gone, replaced by an invigorating, almost joyful sense of purpose. Hope mixed with a healthy dose of cold, calculated determination. Victoria Crawford had made the classic mistake of the powerful. She confused her privileged position with genuine superiority. She believed she was untouchable. There, in the dimly lit kitchen of her modest apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of unpaid bills and the pressing anxiety of her son's health, Kesha was building something Victoria could never buy, inherit, or bully her way into. A meticulously crafted plan. A plan forged in the fires of injustice by someone who knew what it meant to fight from a disadvantage, and more importantly, what it took to win against all odds. Victoria didn't know it yet, but every arrogant post, every cruel comment, every public display of prejudice was another brick in the foundation of her own ruin. The week that followed was a masterclass in psychological warfare with Kesha as its silent, unwilling recipient. Victoria, not content with merely firing and publicly shaming her, had embarked on a scorched earth campaign to ensure Kesha's professional ruin. 3 job interviews, secured through old contacts, were cancelled at the last minute. The excuses were polite but vague: sudden budget changes, an internal restructuring, the position has been put on hold. Kesha knew it was Victoria's doing. She could feel the tendrils of her former boss's influence tightening around her. The fourth company's HR manager, a middle-aged woman named Sarah with kind eyes and a weary expression, was more direct. She called Kesha into her office after the interview. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm probably breaking a half-dozen rules by telling you this," Sarah said, leaning forward and lowering her voice. "You're perfectly overqualified really, but I got an informal phone call about your work history. Nothing official, just a warning, a whisper from a connected executive. I can't officially consider it in my decision, but I can't completely ignore it either. I'm sorry." Kesha left that office not with anger, but with a chilling clarity. This wasn't just a personal vendetta. It was a systematic blacklisting. Victoria wasn't just closing doors, she was salting the earth so nothing could grow. Again. That same afternoon, Marcus called. The tone of his voice was different. It was a mixture of professional outrage and disbelief. "You won't believe the half of it, Kesha," he said, without preamble. "This isn't just a pattern, it's a pathology. This woman documents everything." Marcus had done what he did best. He had bypassed flimsy corporate firewalls and exploited Victoria's abysmal digital security practices. He had gained access to her personal cloud storage. What he found there made Kesha's blood run cold. Victoria kept a digital trophy file. It was a secret, meticulously organized collection of folders, one for each employee she had targeted and fired. Inside were screenshots of private text messages, secretly recorded audio clips of conversations, and candid photos taken without the subject's knowledge. "She has photos of you in there, Kesha," Marcus said, his voice tight with disgust. "Photos taken secretly during meetings over the last year. There are mean-spirited notes attached, speculating about your personal life, making crude comments about your clothes, your hair. It's sick. It's a sociopath's scrapbook." Kesha closed her eyes, a wave of nausea washing over her. The sense of violation was profound. Every smile she had offered, every professional courtesy she had extended, had been catalogued by this woman as a weakness, a point of mockery. "How did you get this, Marcus?" she whispered. "Let's just say private investigators have their methods, and people who store their passwords in a text file named passwords aren't as smart as they think they are," he replied grimly. "There's more. She runs a private WhatsApp group. The group chat is named Executive Circle. It's her and 4 other high-level female executives from different firms across the city. They trade information on problematic employees. They coordinate to blacklist people. This is organized. It's a cartel of corporate bullies." This was the smoking gun. This elevated it from one cruel boss to a conspiracy. Meanwhile, the reality of her situation was closing in. Jordan's asthma, exacerbated by the stress and the disruption in their routine, had worsened. Twice that week, she had to rush him to the emergency room, his small body struggling for every breath. She spent her last $300 on nebulizer treatments and doctor's appointments. The dwindling numbers in her bank account, a constant screaming siren in her head that it was during the second trip to the hospital while sitting in the sterile, harshly lit waiting room at 2 a.m. that fate intervened. "Kesha," the voice was familiar. She looked up from her phone, where she had been numbly scrolling through job postings, and saw Diana Santos. Diana was a brilliant project manager who had been at Morrison and Associates until about 6 months ago. Victoria had fired her, citing cultural incompatibility after Diana had requested a modified schedule to care for her mother, who was battling cancer. Oh my God, Kasia stood up, and the two women embraced. It was the hug of survivors, a shared understanding that needed no words. I'm surviving, Diana said, pulling back, her eyes dark with a familiar pain. How about you? I heard what Victoria, she did the same thing to you that she did to me. They found a small 24-hour cafeteria in the hospital and talked for 2 hours over cups of bitter cold coffee. Diana's story mirrored Kasia's in terrifying detail. Victoria had spread rumors about her being emotionally unstable. She had deliberately sabotaged one of Diana's key presentations by losing the final slides minutes before the meeting, just to manufacture a reason to criticize her performance. You know what hurts the most, Diana said, her voice trembling with a rage she had clearly suppressed for months. It's that she does this because she can, because she knows that women like us, minority women, single mothers, we don't have the resources to fight back. She banks on us being too broken and too poor to pose a threat. Kasia looked at Diana, a newfound ally, a sister in arms. She took a deep breath. What if I told you, she said, her voice low and steady, that maybe we have more resources than she thinks. Diana looked at her, a flicker of hope in her tired eyes. What do you mean? Kasia told her everything. About Marcus, about her meticulous investigation, about Victoria's secret trophy file and the WhatsApp group. She watched as Diana's eyes filled with tears, not tears of sadness, but of cathartic relief. The relief of knowing she wasn't crazy, she wasn't alone, and that justice was, for the first time, a tangible possibility. I want in, Diana said, her voice firm, resolute. I want to help. I have everything, Kasia. I saved everything. Printouts of her emails with inappropriate comments. A timeline of the sabotage. Something told me I would need it one day. That night, Kasia created a new WhatsApp group of her own. She called it Project_Justice, she added Diana. Through Diana, she got in touch with 3 other women Victoria had fired. A software engineer, a marketing lead, a paralegal. Each had her own story of humiliation. Each had kept her own file of evidence. What Victoria didn't know was that her obsession with documenting her conquests had created an arsenal of evidence that was now being compiled by a war council of the very women she had tried to destroy. A message from Marcus came in late that night. It was the nail in the coffin. Kasia got into the company financials. Victoria is embezzling. She's been padding the budget for the employee training and development fund and using it to pay for personal travel and luxury goods. Over $120,000 in the last 18 months. I have the forged receipts and the corresponding credit card statements. We've got her. Kasia looked over at Jordan, who had fallen asleep on the couch, his chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm, the new inhaler resting on the end table beside him. She smiled. It wasn't a smile of joy, but of grim satisfaction. It was the smile of a general who has just received confirmation that the enemy's fortress is built on a foundation of sand. Victoria Crawford had spent years collecting trophies. She had no idea she was about to become one. 3 weeks after the fated hospital meeting, the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. It arrived, as the most crucial intelligence often does, in the form of an excited, late-night phone call. From Marcus. Kasia, she did it. The fool actually did it, he said, his voice buzzing with the thrill of the chase. Victoria just made her fatal mistake. What happened? Kasia asked, her heart beginning to pound. She fired another employee yesterday, publicly humiliated her in a team meeting, and, like the narcissist she is, she recorded it and posted a triumphant little clip on LinkedIn. She's done that before, Marcus. What makes this different? Because, this time, Marcus said, and Kasia could practically hear him grinning through the phone. The employee she fired is a white woman, and not just any white woman. The employee is Jennifer Walsh, as in, the daughter of Senator David Walsh. Kasia felt a slow, cold smile spread across her face. The same Senator Walsh who's running for governor on a platform of family values and supporting working mothers. The one and only, Marcus confirmed. Victoria clearly didn't do her homework. Jennifer is furious. She's not scared, and she's not broke. She wants blood. I reached out to her, told her we had a file of evidence that showed a pattern of this behavior she wants to meet. She said she has the right contacts to make sure this story doesn't just get told, it gets national exposure. The next afternoon, Kesha met Jennifer Walsh in a discreet corner of a quiet downtown cafe. Jennifer was a polished 35-year-old woman with sharp blue eyes and an air of coiled intensity. She was exactly the type of person Victoria usually cultivated, not crucified. Victoria made a grave miscalculation, Jennifer said, her voice tight with controlled anger as she stirred her cappuccino. She thought I was just another cog in the machine she could humiliate for sport. She had no idea who my family was, and now I have a producer at America Exposed who is very interested in this story. Systemic discrimination in the modern workplace. It's going to be their lead segment next week, but I need more than just my story. I need a pattern. I need irrefutable proof. Kesha nodded slowly, took a sip of her water, and opened her laptop. I have exactly what you need. For the next 2 hours, Kesha walked Jennifer through Project_Justice. She showed her Victoria's Secret trophy file, displaying the secretly taken photos and the vile, derogatory comments. She showed her the screenshots from the Executive Circle WhatsApp group, revealing the coordinated blacklisting conspiracy. She presented the meticulously documented evidence of the embezzlement, complete with forged receipts. And finally, she showed her the folder containing 15 different cases of discriminatory dismissals, complete with timelines, witness statements, and Diana's saved emails. My God, Jennifer whispered, her face pale as she stared at the screen. She's a monster. She's much worse than I ever imagined. There's one more thing, Kesha said, her voice flat, emotionless. She opened the last file. It was a collection of video clips. Victoria has a habit of recording her firings so she can relive them, I suppose, brag about them. I have 15 videos of women, black women, Latinas, mothers being humiliated by her, including my own. Jennifer was silent for a full minute. Her eyes locked on Kesha's. You know that when this comes out, she said softly, it's going to destroy her. Her career, her reputation, everything. Completely. Kesha met her gaze without flinching. She destroyed 15 careers. Jennifer, she jeopardized the health of my child. She systematically targeted and tormented vulnerable women for sport. She knew her actions had consequences. She just never, ever expected them to apply to her. She closed the laptop. It's time she learned they do. 5 days later, the bomb detonated. The show, America Exposed, aired on a Tuesday night. It devoted a full 45 minutes to methodically and brutally dissecting the corporate culture of Morrison and Associates and the reign of terror of Victoria Crawford. Jennifer Walsh's media contacts had ensured the story was cross-promoted on major news websites and was trending on Twitter before the broadcast even began. It opened with the grainy cell phone footage of Kesha's dismissal. The nation watched as a black mother, clutching her sick child, was publicly fired and humiliated. They heard Victoria's condescending tone, her sweeping generalization about single mothers. Then, the presenter, a renowned investigative journalist, revealed Victoria's Secret trophy file. Unauthorized photos of female employees flashed across the screen, the cruel, handwritten style captions appearing in bold text beside them, malicious speculation about their personal lives, derogatory jokes about their bodies. What you are seeing, the presenter said, her voice grave, is how a senior executive at a major American consulting firm systematically documented her abuse of vulnerable employees. Next came the messages from the WhatsApp group, exposing the conspiracy to blacklist employees across 5 major companies in the city. The names of the other executives were redacted, but the companies were named. The final blow was the evidence of the embezzlement, with an expert forensic accountant explaining exactly how Victoria had siphoned $120,000 from a fund meant to develop employees into her personal bank account. Victoria was in a late-night meeting with a team from a potential client when her assistant burst into the room, her face ashen. Ms. Crawford, she stammered, holding out her phone. You need to see this. Right now. Victoria glanced at the screen and saw her own face staring back from a national news broadcast. The audio from the program, detailing her secret files, echoed through the suddenly silent conference room. 15 minutes later, when the show displayed the unauthorized photos she had taken, she felt her legs go weak. Her phone began to vibrate incessantly. The first call was from her father, his voice a furious roar, screaming about the shame and the scandal she had brought upon the family name. The next was from the company's chief legal officer, his tone icy, informing her that 15 former employees had, that afternoon, filed simultaneous, multi-million-dollar lawsuits for sexual harassment, discrimination, invasion of privacy, and wrongful termination. Victoria Crawford, the TV host concluded, as the screen showed a montage of the women she had wronged, their faces now resolute and strong, represents the devastating impact of unchecked corporate power. But her victims, brave women like Kesha Rodriguez, Diana Santos, and Jennifer Walsh, have proven that no tyrant is invincible when the oppressed unite for justice. 2 hours later, Victoria Crawford was escorted out of the Morrison and Associates building by the same security guards who had escorted Kesha out weeks before. Her own dismissal was live-streamed on the company's official Instagram account as swift, brutal act of corporate damage control. The irony was devastatingly poetic. The next morning, Kesha's phone rang. It was the new interim director of Morrison and Associates, Ms. Rodriguez. The man's voice was humbled, desperate. On behalf of the entire firm, I would like to formally offer you your job back, with a promotion to senior manager of strategic projects, and of course, significant financial compensation for the damages and distress caused. Kesha stood by her window, looking down at the city below. On her kitchen table, Jordan was quietly drawing with a brand new 120-piece set of colored pencils that a mysterious benefactor Marcus had sent over. "Thank you for the offer," she replied, her voice calm and clear. "But I'm afraid I'm considering other opportunities." The truth was, since the story broke, her inbox had been flooded. 3 rival firms had already reached out, offering her senior executive positions. They weren't offering her a job out of pity. They had seen how she had masterfully orchestrated Victoria's downfall. They saw a brilliant strategist, a meticulous planner, a leader who could execute a complex, multifaceted plan flawlessly. Those were the qualities they wanted. 6 months later, Kesha sat behind a large, minimalist desk made of reclaimed oak. It was her desk, in her office, as the new chief executive officer of Davies & Partners, the most respected and innovative consulting firm in the city. From her window on the 23rd floor, she had a clear view of the Morrison and Associates building. A large for-lease sign now hung across its facade. The company had declared bankruptcy 3 months after the scandal. The 15 lawsuits, a federal investigation into systematic discrimination, and the mass exodus of clients had been a death blow. The domino effect had also cleaned house at the other 4 firms implicated in the blacklisting scheme. Jordan, now thriving with access to the best pediatric asthma specialists in the state, had his own small table in a corner of her spacious office. His drawings had evolved. He no longer drew cars. Now, he drew powerful superheroes in business suits, vanquishing corporate dragons not with fire, but with intelligence and briefcases held like shields. That afternoon, she had a visitor. Diana Santos, now the head of corporate diversity and inclusion for a Fortune 500 company, sat in the plush armchair opposite Kesha's desk. "I ran into her yesterday," Diana said softly. "Victoria, at the supermarket. She was applying for a job as a cashier." Kesha listened, her expression unreadable. "She's lost everything," Diana continued. "Her family disowned her. Her name is so toxic no corporation will touch her. She recognized me. She just lowered her head and scurried away, I think for the first time in her life, she finally understood what it feels like to be invisible." Kesha's phone rang. It was Jennifer Walsh. "Kesha, the bill passed the Senate subcommittee. They're calling it the Corporate Discrimination and Accountability Act, but unofficially, the senators are calling it the Kesha Rodriguez Act." Kesha closed her eyes, a single, silent tear tracing a path down her cheek. Her mother's words echoed in her memory. "True victory isn't about defeating your enemy, it's about turning your pain into protection for others." A year after her humiliating dismissal, Kesha stood on a stage, bathed in the warm glow of spotlights, addressing an audience of 2,000 of the nation's most powerful female executives. In the front row, Diana, Jennifer, and the other women from Project_Justice watched, their faces beaming. "The best revenge," Kesha said, her voice resonating with a quiet power that held the entire auditorium rapt, "is not to stoop to the level of those who harm you. It is to use their arrogance, their cruelty, as the fuel to build something so magnificent, so impactful, that they become a forgotten footnote in your own triumphant story." The audience rose as one, the sound of their applause a thunderous wave of affirmation. Victoria Crawford had spent years obsessively collecting trophies of the people she had destroyed. She documented every humiliation with a sick, self-congratulatory pride. She never imagined that she was simply compiling the evidence for her own prosecution, building the case that would be used by a woman who understood a fundamental truth: the arrogance of the powerful always contains the seeds of its own destruction. Kesha had learned that strength isn't about the power to step on others, it's about the resilience to rise after being stepped on, so dignified and so brilliantly that the world has no choice but to stop and applaud. When you trade righteous anger for strategic intelligence, you don't just win a battle, you rewrite the rules of the game for everyone, forever.